I think we can go and get started. So like we started with, a welcome to today's session. We're very excited to hear from our panelists on best practices for DevOps and security in digital banking mobile apps. And the reason why we're so excited is because, as we've all seen each year, consumers and employees increasingly use mobile apps, especially for banking. Last week, I was at a payments conference and amazed at how many different ways and new ways mobile apps are being used for payment. I saw how, and you've all seen how mobile apps are increasingly used because mobile devices are becoming terminals for e-commerce, as well as banking transactions. And that means securing these apps and releasing them on time is complicated by specific characteristics of these mobile apps, the diversity of these platforms, and the unique expectations of mobile users. So I am honored today to be joined by this stellar panel to discuss the challenges and best practices in securing digital banking mobile apps. So we want to hear your questions. Please enter them in the Q&A and we'll answer them as we go along in this discussion. Let's first introduce our speakers and where they are today. So let's go around the panel, starting with Madre.
Hi, my name is Madre Ritman, and I am a product marketing manager here at Bitrise. As you might have heard, where I am is across the pond in Amsterdam. So where my day is ending, yours is probably starting, or maybe it's somewhere in between. Just a bit about Bitrise. We are a CI/CD platform built for mobile DevOps. Specifically for mobile because, the founders kind of realized that mobile has its own unique, distinct challenges differing from web. We have a mobile-first CI/CD tool suite, including caching, release management, insights, and so forth. And that's it from me in a nutshell. Over to you, Karen.
Great. And Marcus, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, yes. I'm Marcus Durod. I've been in software development for the past 30 years. First 20 years, but mainly focused on quality assurance and product management. And the last 10 years, focused on mobile security and risk. Currently working for FIS Global, but previous employers include IBM, Comcast Interactive, and Mattel. And we use Bitrise, Bitrise and Appdome in our DevSecOps pipeline. Jesse?
Hello, everyone. My name is Jesse LaValle. I'm product owner at FIS. I oversee our mobile DevOps team. I've been working with mobile apps for a little over 10 years now in a variety of roles. I am in East Coast time, so I'm actually located over in Tampa, Florida. So I look forward to the discussions today.
Great. And I'm Karen. I'm SVP of Mobile DevOps and Security at Appdome. I focus on DevSecOps automation. And at Appdome, what we do is have over 250 features that we enable the development team and security teams to automate protections in as part of the build process. So we're very excited today for you guys to join. We're going to delve into a number of topic areas. So we'll start with the challenges of deploying digital banking apps. And then we'll go into the ways to address those challenges, including the role of DevOps in mobile app development and security in mobile DevOps and development. Then we'll end with the best practices and key learnings our panelists have found in releasing digital banking mobile apps at scale. So to better tailor our responses to your needs, we prepared a few polling questions. So we'll start with the challenges of deploying digital banking mobile apps at scale. So before we get to that, let's hear from you, the audience, on this topic. So could we have the first polling question? Okay. And so in this question, please share what your biggest challenges are when releasing secure digital banking mobile apps. Is it protecting the apps from hackers and fraud, or complying with industry standards or regulations? Is it keeping pace with new feature requests and needs, or is it scalability and performance? And you can choose multiple ones here. Okay, and could we share the results? Okay, so it looks like most of you are having challenges with protecting the app from hackers and fraud and complying with industry standards and regulations, followed by keeping pace with new features and then scalability and performance. So thank you for that. We will adjust our responses accordingly. And as we do that, Marcus, can you talk a little bit about what you have seen as a shift to mobile banking apps over the years, and weave in or maybe start with what FIS does so that people understand your perspective, and especially what FIS has to do and the challenges FIS faces.
Yeah, so more broadly, we're in the space, we're making mobile banking applications. And as you know, as time goes on, more and more banks are closing their branches. And more and more, the face of the company, face of the banks, and their most often touch point for most consumers is the mobile banking app. So as consumers are interacting with their banks less, and almost exclusively through the mobile channel, in response, companies are adopting a digital first experience where they'll release features to mobile first instead of to the online banking channel over the web, or opening new branches. So a lot of that focus has been shifted to the mobile channel.
Yeah, and you work with thousands of banks or credit unions, is that correct? And their challenges.
So our company does provide mobile banking apps to hundreds of financial institutions, and we service millions of users through those applications.
Great. So Jesse, what have you found makes building and releasing these mobile apps unique?
Yeah, so really everything about the mobile ecosystem is very unique as a whole. Building mobile apps and deploying them out is very different than web applications. So you have to take into, well, first off, there's a lot of considerations with new operating systems, new devices, new store requirements from Apple and Google that come out on regular cadences. So you have to factor all of those in. And then when you're deploying these apps to Apple and Google, there's a lot of uniqueness around having to go through their store submission process and their approval processes. And once you get past those, you still have to actually release your app out to the store, and the end users have to actually consume it at that point. When you talk like a traditional web application, you deploy it out to the server, everyone kind of gets it. Mobile applications are very unique, as there's a lot of steps that need to happen to get it out the door. It's not as quick as everyone kind of assumes it to be.
Right. And so just as you were talking about, mobile app security is different because mobile development is different. And there are a lot of misconceptions around how maybe network security could take care of things, as well as application security, existing application security issues, and that you can take what you do for these existing solutions and apply it to mobile. But that's not the case. And we'll talk about some of these issues in particular, like authentication. And while all these things are important, you really do need security that's specific to mobile apps in there. And that includes protection from static and dynamic attacks. So static attacks are about exploiting vulnerabilities that can be identified through the analysis of static code. For example, hard-coded credentials or API keys that are in the code. Dynamic attacks are about attacks on the app during runtime, such as account takeover, SQL injection, malware, and so forth. I've been talking to a lot of credit unions and banks about how they're overwhelmed with bots and malware, and all of them have to do with, and all of them have an authentication solution, but agree that a multi-layered approach is needed. So if you have authentication, you still need to protect from live attacks, such as account takeovers, which have gone up over 354% in 2023 compared to 2022. So these are a number of issues that I've talked to banks and credit unions about. So Marcus, specifically, why do you think digital banking mobile apps require stringent security measures, and what are the specific issues around digital banking?
Yeah, so mobile banking applications are a prime target for hackers and fraudsters because of their money movement capabilities. Modern banking applications are required to be on the forefront of security, based on these, so being such a high value target. So, modern banking applications are required to, deal with threats like malware, key logging, screen overlays, accessibility exploits, SMS stealing capabilities. So it's basically an arms race between the hackers and the security professionals trying to secure your apps. So while it's difficult to stop all the attack vectors, the more layers of protection you have, the more secure your app will be, and the less likely it will be targeted. And hackers will kind of move on to a less protected app that's a little easier to make profits on in a quick way, in a more quick succession. So yeah, so the more layers you can add, the harder it makes their job, and the more likely they'll move on to another victim.
And Jesse, what are the biggest challenges you've seen over the years in terms of securing mobile apps and releasing them on time?
Yeah, so one of the biggest challenges is trying to move fast. As you add more and more security scans or code quality gates into your development life cycles, sometimes that can extend the timelines for the development life cycle, but it's also going to save you time in the long run, right? So a good approach that can be done to solve this is shifting a lot of that left. So if you shift a lot of your code quality gates, your security scans left into the development cycles, you'll fail a lot faster and get quicker feedback loops. So hopefully a lot of that's addressed ahead of like development releasing their features or functionality out and being consumed in mobile apps. So that shift left model is definitely beneficial for speeding up kind of your deployment cycles. And hopefully once you get to your production release, you have a pretty stable and secure app that goes out the door that you can release, and take into account also, like I talked to prior, is Apple and Google, their requirements for the store. It's not just your development's done and you've released to production, you still have to account for that time frame that comes up as well. So shifting a lot of that left helps you speed up in the long run.
And so I see some of the questions in the chat about the screen. Yes, so we're having a discussion here, so there are no slides being shared yet, but we'll get to that a bit later, and we'll have a demonstration really quickly at the end so you see how this ties all together, since those questions have come up before. And so, Marcus, what have you seen in terms of teams being operationally, being able to take on all the security that's needed, kind of the challenges there, building on what Jesse's talked about?
Yeah, so in the current economic environment, as companies rely on smaller and smaller teams and budgets, it's increasingly difficult to find and hire and retain security subject matter experts, and then to have them train on mastering proprietary tooling from different vendors. So having development partners that are specialized in specific security disciplines and DevOps practices is crucial to providing fast and reliable and secure solutions to customers. Having security professionals who keep up with industry trends and iterate and implement tooling improvements is key to keeping ahead of security threats. So having this expertise at hand when needed, but not on a payroll as a full-time employee is a cost-effective competitive advantage, in my opinion.
Yeah, so to address the challenges we just talked about around mobile development, our next set of questions will be on the role of DevOps in mobile app development. And so before we get to that, let's hear from the audience on this topic. And could we have the next polling question, please? And this is where we'll discuss whether or not, or understand whether or not you're using a platform today to streamline the development of mobile apps. And so if you could just answer quickly there, that'd be great. And we'll just, okay. And so it looks like it's a mix in the audience, but most do have a development platform or a DevOps platform. Okay, so thank you for that. And so, Madre, would you be able to talk about DevOps practices and how they streamline the development process from your perspective?
Yeah, sure. So DevOps streamlines development by removing the barriers that's usually within teams and older companies where you have like teams still working in silos. And DevOps automates, tasks like testing and deployment, and they foster that continuous improvement and work between teams as they continue throughout the DevOps lifecycle. So while DevOps actually applies broadly to like software development itself, I mentioned earlier that, mobile DevOps is something completely different. And it takes it a step further by, you know, targeting those pain points that developers have when they develop for, you know, apps like banking. These things includes, you know, device fragmentation or optimizing performance in limited environments and dealing with platform specific features and issues and APIs. Like JC also mentioned, you know, shifting left is a huge thing here. So the mobile focus actually is super critical in banking, where data security and regulatory compliances are vital. And integrating DevOps practices actually ensures that the banking app development teams can prioritize security early as well as throughout the whole development lifecycle. So that just in turn like reduces the vulnerabilities. Sorry, tongue twister there. By ensuring, you know, earlier compliance with those regulations and also just streamlining the whole process. Maybe it's also just good to add here that, you know, rolling back in mobile is super complex and sometimes impossible to do, and avoiding those errors are critical, especially in banking where, you know, yeah, companies can undergo huge financial losses. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And so we have a question from the audience about what's different about the banking application. So Jesse, as you go through your response, could you share your perspective about banking apps as opposed to, or banking mobile apps, sorry, as opposed to web apps?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're going to address like banking applications as a whole, regulatory and compliance is huge, right, in the banking industry. So you have to take a lot of that into account. So security is obviously at the forefront of that. So you can address a lot of that through implementing a lot of gates in your development lifecycle. So when you think about like a CI/CD pipeline that you know is going to allow you to produce a secure and stable application, you're going to be looking at something where you integrate a lot of these scans and code quality gates early in your development lifecycle. So as your developers are actually developing their code, you're checking it against scans, and then you're also implementing some hard gates, right? So you're not even allowing them to release an application if it doesn't pass a gate that you set as a standard. So a lot of what you'll see that the company should do is implement these hard gates early in their development lifecycle. So as you're getting features and functionality out the door, you can ensure that they're stable and secure and be able to be consumed in market. When you compare this to like, you know, like the release cycles for like a web application versus a mobile application, web applications can obviously get deployed out to a server and rolled back, kind of like Madre was mentioning here, right? It's like there's that ability to roll back if you see some type of failure. When you're talking mobile applications, once it goes out the door and you're past Apple and Google's checks, you know, that they approved your application and consumers start to download it, you're in a little bit more of a tough spot here with mobile applications. There's no ability to roll back with mobile apps. You essentially have to fast track a release and get it back out the door for those consumers to consume it. So mobile is a little bit of a different beast when you talk about actually releasing it out the door and users actually consuming it. So you need to take that all into account. Apple and Google both have testing rails that you can test on. Apple has TestFlight. Google has different testing tracks that you can utilize. Those are always really important too when you're trying to get something out the door, you know, doing a quick little check of your application prior to actually promoting it up to production and getting out the door. Those are always kind of like safe gates to do as well.
Okay, great. So now that we've talked about DevOps and best practices there, let's delve into the challenges around securing digital banking mobile apps at scale. And so for that, our next set of questions will be on integrating security with mobile DevOps or mobile DevSecOps. And so to get the audience's view on this topic, could we have our next polling question? And so this is where we want to hear from you as to what kind of tools you use and whether it's automated security testing tools like SaaS, DAS tools. Do you have pen testers that you use, whether internally or externally? Do you have a process for automating security and fraud prevention, meaning automating those protections in? Do you have threat monitoring, or maybe you don't have any of that? So it looks like it's actually split between pen testing. And so pen testing is one of them, as well as there are a lot of folks who don't have any solutions or don't know. And that is certainly something we can help with you later, as well as some threat monitoring. So thanks for that feedback. And uh, so we'll start with the main components of security for mobile DevSecOps and what they are. So I'll outline some of them and hand the rest over to Marcus to address. So the main security components of mobile DevSecOps include first, risk assessment and security testing. And Marcus will go into more detail as to those specific components. It also includes security and fraud protections, compliance, that we talked about earlier that Jesse mentioned. Mobile DevSecOps also includes real-time monitoring of live attacks, as well as security release management and collaboration among teams. So I'll delve into a bit of security protections. And security protections include things like encryption and code obfuscation, to prevent reverse engineering. But protections also include man-in-the-middle attack prevention, as well as jailbreak and root detection, mobile privacy. And I know this was something that was asked about earlier in terms of protecting PII data, as well as preventing screen sharing and inadvertent copy paste that people don't know they're doing that may leak information about their credentials or themselves. Real-time monitoring includes things like detecting and responding to security events in live applications. And this also includes protecting apps from emerging threats and vulnerabilities. So Marcus, can you talk a bit more about security testing and risk assessment, and in particular the areas that you want to call out?
Yeah, so part of a good DevSecOps pipeline is kind of lining up all your security tools to execute on builds and run scans and provide feedback to developers, immediate feedback on changes. So some of the tools that are used across large companies, definitely, you've all heard of static code analysis, and also dynamic code analysis. Tools like Veracode and Black Duck doing open source software scans. Also, a good part of having your Bitrise pipeline and DevSecOps is having code quality tools that check for unit test coverage, standards enforcement, and can reject what Jesse was referring to as a hard gate. If there's not 60 or 80% of unit test coverage for security test cases, then it might reject the build altogether and tell the developer to add more unit tests, as well as any coding standards that the dev team wants to enforce. There's also for more advanced teams, you can place dynamic penetration testing inside the DevSecOps pipeline. So as soon as a build is complete, the build will be run on a device, maybe a virtual device, sometimes a real device, and a set of security test cases will be run directly on the device, and then reporting will happen during the pipeline run. So depending on how advanced you get and how far you want to shift left and how much your company wants to invest in security, there are lots of steps to kind of plug in to tools like Bitrise that allow for things like obfuscation, for you from a provider like Appdome or other security monitoring and fraud protection. So those are some of the things that I've seen and used, and I think are really key to having a good DevSecOps pipeline.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. That's a great overview. And so this is kind of where we're going to shift a bit to the next level problem. So we've talked a lot about the components and the best practices around DevOps and what's in mobile DevOps and mobile DevSecOps. But let's talk a bit more about the challenge around implementing them. And so you talked, Marcus, about scans and those things are extremely important. What we found in talking to a lot of our customers is that the security teams, once they get those scans back and present that to the development teams then have a decision to make. Do they go and refactor the code, which may potentially delay the release and make those changes, or do they waiver those issues? And so this is one of the conundrums that teams face. And then the other situation also happens in the actual release of the apps where the teams are monitoring the apps and find issues. Again, the challenge is, do they make those changes, refactor the code, or do they, and that could delay the next release, or do they waiver those changes? So all the things that we talked about are important, but then this higher or next level problem leads us to really the friction that cyber and dev have. And Marcus, if you could go into a little bit more about what you've seen and how your organization or the ones that you work with have dealt with this.
Yeah, sure, Karen. Definitely, it's very important and challenging to do development security collaboration correctly, because the teams are kind of set up, you know, to have with different goals, right? The development team is trying to get to production as quickly as possible, and then security team is trying to keep everything out of production that's not secure. And so what happens a lot of times is there's more and more reporting and gates and checks that the security team will kind of implement on top of the development team for releases. And so what happens a lot of times is when you get ready for a release, you know, you might find out late in the state, you know, late from security, or there might be a new finding from security that would potentially block your release because of the standards for release that we have. So it's really a problem that needs to be addressed by kind of bringing security and development together and have as partners in development, and trying to get security involved as early as possible, and kind of having reporting, you know, throughout the DevOps pipeline so that there aren't any surprises. So both teams are working towards a shared goal, and the development teams understand the importance of the security aspects that are being called out, and that there is some type of risk-based approach, so that both teams can feel like they're getting their goals met.
Right. And Madre, how would you talk about, or how do you think security is best integrated into the DevOps pipeline?
Actually, Marcus kind of spoke to everything already there. I can just basically agree with what he said. You know, it needs to be implemented early. You need to involve all the teams. You need to make sure, you know, that you are shifting left, and also that everyone within your development team has that DevOps mindset. I think that's something culturally needs to happen at companies. But then also, you know, like, you're thinking about how you can make that security DevOps lifecycle more secure by things like, you know, Marcus mentioned security checks. You know, you're talking about integrations that you can use. You're talking about running scans and risk management. I think Jesse mentioned that. But then you can also think about things like, you know, security training, implementing that culture, flaky test detection, unit testing, UI testing, snapshot testing, regression testing, integration testing. The list goes on. So I think it basically depends on your team and what your team wants and needs to achieve within, you know, their development life cycle, and then you kind of have to strategize and think, you know, what will meet those need states.
Right. And then, as you both have said, shifting left makes it easier on the developers to build in that security, and not have to use SDKs or coding or things like that, to and have really a process to automate. And so, Marcus, and Jesse, what's important to you in terms of a mobile DevSecOps solution, in terms, you know, whether it's scalability, breadth of security, and what are some lessons that you've learned?
Yeah, I'll go first, Jesse. So from my perspective, it's what's important to me in DevSecOps solution is the quality of the solution, the stability of the solution, and then, you know, the folks that are standing behind the solution. Having many security options is definitely a plus as well for when you want to expand and add capabilities. But equally as important to large companies with hundreds of apps being built and deployed each week is that the solution is stable and reliable, and it's a repeatable process of implementing the services. So it's really important when you're working at scale, and you can't really afford to have things not work every day.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything Mark had said there. Moving a lot of this, you know, DevSecOps or security scans and early into the development life cycles is extremely important, right? You get a lot of that addressed early on. and they're not gotchas later down the road when you're trying to deploy or release, right? That you have to go back to development. So if you can address a lot of these early on in your development life cycles, it saves you hassle in the end.
Right. And so now let's shift to the last part of our discussion with our experts, which is around the best practices in DevOps and security for digital mobile banking apps. Madre and Jesse, how have plugins and integrations expedited the release of mobile apps, mobile banking apps specifically? And could you talk a little bit about that?
JC, I'll go first. It's basically a way to streamline app development by reducing that mental load developers have, and it boosts efficiency. Usually they think about all these things, but with integrations, it does it for them. And some platforms provide those ready-to-use drag-and-drop integrations and plugins that automate the build tasks. And basically, you don't have to write manual script. I think that frees you up for an extra cup of coffee or a glass of water or a chat with a colleague, and that's always nice. And it just allows you to also focus on other priorities. Specifically, these tools enhance the development process in 3 ways. Maybe you guys disagree with me, but I think it really accelerates the development time by automating those build processes, really simplifying it, so developers don't have to worry about that manual configuration. I also think it enhances security by really making the integration of the features into the apps super easy and fast, which also helps, with compliance and making sure that user data is protected. We've iterated on how important that is today. And then also, I think it ensures that consistent code quality, not only code quality, but that it's a consistent thing in your DevOps lifecycle. It just helps you to maintain, high standards of security and performance. And that, in turn, again, helps you to meet those expectations that users have, especially with a banking app. You don't want to use a banking app and all of a sudden, it's faulty or flaky. It just eliminates the trust. So I think, a lot of things helps for developers with integration, but JC, maybe you can also add to that. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there. So the plugins and integrations definitely streamline a lot of the development life cycles, right? It's easier to plug and play. You're not manually creating these scripts to do some type of testing. So like Bitrise has tons of these options, right? That you can use plugins or integrations with other tools out there. And like Madre was mentioning, right? You get quicker feedback loops. It removes a lot of the manual tasks that you do on a regular basis. You can automate a lot of those. So anytime you can automate tasks and move quicker, it's a benefit across the board.
Right, and this kind of summarizes here, this slide here, what we've talked about in terms of the different steps and how you can automate those steps in the process. And just like Jesse and Madre talked about, how you can put in different steps in the process that are best practices, for example, plugins or things like that, making it easier for developers. And we'll show a little bit about how that works later on. So Marcus, could you talk a bit about support? So there's these steps and there's the automation, but when you're looking for partners in this process, how important is support in that and maintainability as a part of that?
You're on mute, Marcus.
Thanks, Jesse. So yeah, support and maintainability are paramount importance. It's critical for organizations to find partners that can actively support your current development process, while also continuously monitoring the security landscape and making updates to tooling that support changes to that landscape. It's hard to have a team that's dedicated to each of these security disciplines on your team, and kind of like working on your current stuff as well as advancing technology and providing updates to your tooling stack to combat new threats. So having somebody that can actively support you is very important, and I can't stress enough that having reliable partners makes a difference between the successful organization and upset customers.
Okay, great. So thank you for that. I think I was noticing we have a number of questions, so I'm going to pause and go to those questions for a bit before we wrap up with our last one. And so I see in the questions, legacy systems may be difficult to automate or integrate with modern DevOps tools and practices. How can we deal with that? I think that's a good question. Anyone feel free to jump in there.
I would say sometimes the best thing to do is move to a tool that is that's capable of automating and integrating a lot of these tools you want to do, or plugins or integrations. Sometimes when you try to enhance a legacy system, it gets more complex and complicated. And sometimes the cost is actually more than if you were to just shift to a different tool altogether. Sometimes that's difficult as well, though, to move from a legacy system. So
Yeah, I'll just jump in as well and say that so with tools like Bitrise, it is still possible to integrate legacy workflows. There's a lot of flexibility around what kind of steps you can use and what kind of languages you can use and what kind of calls you can use. So I would say just to experiment with the tooling that's out there and just kind of make sure that you kind of validate the assumption that you can't do it, because we've been able to take some of our legacy solutions and plug them into pipelines that are new age pipelines, or Bitrise pipelines that are more dedicated to apps, but we still have some microservices and things that we can automate with Bitrise as well. So I would just challenge you to actually try to do that, and I think you'll be surprised at the stuff you can orchestrate.
Okay, and we have a question around shifting left. Do you see any value in threat modeling?
Yeah, I saw that, and I think it could tie in well with another of the questions about the PII for cloud services and stuff. So as far as threat modeling goes, it's not a fun practice. It's kind of a pain in the butt to go through. But one of the great things that comes out of that is identifying where your PII data is, where it lives, kind of looking at the life cycle of your data as it travels through the different systems, and then kind of making sure having that discussion about how we want to protect this data in the different in transit, at rest, when it's being stored in a database. And so doing that exercise really helps kind of identify where authentication is taking place, where the weak points are, kind of identifying all the ciphers and everything that you want to make sure you've got covered. So it's definitely important that, and then you can also use that to map out where your PII data is, and then kind of create a story around how you're handling data in each of the different places, and then kind of identify gaps where you might not be protecting it, and then kind of make a plan for either encrypting it or kind of figuring out what your risk tolerance is for that data.
Right, and I'll just add a little bit to that. So there's, in addition to threat modeling, the threat monitoring. And so monitoring the attacks that are happening. And I could show a little bit of this later, but basically seeing live where the attacks are on your mobile apps, and being able to understand, therefore, where you need to go and add protections, right? And so that's something that's really clear, because this is actually what's happening to your app. That's what the threat monitoring shows you. And you can see this by geography, which country the attacks are coming from. You can see this down to, all the different OSs that you may support, as well as the different devices and apps, and really see where the attacks are happening. And that way you get a real picture, a live picture of what's going on, and can then address those issues appropriately. And so we have some other questions about protecting from remote public repositories. Do you have?
Yeah, I can take that one. Yeah, so that's a kind of that's big in the news right now. You probably heard that one of the big public repos is being hacked maliciously, with millions of repos being uploaded with poison files and stuff. So from my perspective, like remote public repo is just a dangerous sentence in and of itself from a security perspective. Yeah, you definitely can't, and unless your risk tolerance is really high, it just doesn't seem like a good idea. I definitely would suggest local repos, and you know, or if there's a service that has verified repos, that's great too. But yeah, public remote repos, yeah, it's not, I don't think there's much you can do. I don't know, there's a bunch of tooling around that, but I would just avoid it at all costs if possible.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And so we had some other questions that people had from um, the beginning or before this session started. Those include, tasks that can be automated to streamline the development and deployment process. Madre, you want to take that one?
Always just the unmute button. Sorry about that. Yeah, so I mean, I think there are various things that you can automate. Things like code signing, managing your releases, security scanning, unit testing, UI testing, beta distribution. The list really goes on. So once again, it depends on where you are in your DevOps lifecycle, what you need, and how quick you want your feedback loops to be. Sorry about that.
Okay, good. And I know there's some questions around specific tool names and details on how those work, on how the tools work. And so we'll actually end up with a demo of how these tools work, and you'll see more detail of that. And so just to round out, I think there were some questions earlier also about before the session around man-in-the-middle attacks, and that some feel that it's not a problem anymore as banking sites use HTTPS. And so to address this issue, while HTTPS addresses some of these issues, attacks have remained because there are phishing attacks, there are untrusted certificates, and this is where attackers may obtain or compromise the valid certificates. There's misconfigured servers. So basically, man-in-the-middle attacks are still an issue for a number of reasons, and the security protections that we talked about today, and I'll show you in a bit, we'll be able to address those. And so at this time, there is an additional question about, to Marcus, about using third-party libraries, or the case of not using third-party against using third-party libraries. Marcus, I don't know if you want to take that one, or Jesse.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I would say, yeah, sometimes there's no choice with certain third-party, hosted libraries. So I mean, you have to just do as much due diligence as you can. If there's checksums you can look at, but yeah, if I would say avoid at all costs, but sometimes that's just the price of doing business. So just do as much due diligence as you can.
Yeah. Okay, great. And so before we go on and answer some more questions, what I'm going to do is just share, this is something that came up before, and this is around some of the consumer expectations and what Marcus had talked about in terms of consumers, and Jesse had mentioned this before, in terms of what consumers expect. And we do an annual survey of mobile consumers around the world. Over 25,000 people take this survey around the world. And every year, over 90%, over 93% actually, come back and say that they will advocate for the mobile brands that protect them. And that means liking them on social media, writing a positive review, telling their network that they should be using this mobile brand. And that protection includes protecting the data in the app as well as the use of the app. Now, on the flip side, if mobile brands don't protect their end users, there is a bit of a backlash, and consumers will tell their network not to use that app. And so this just highlights the importance of protecting users. They are expecting this protection these days. It's not just take care of yourself and that's okay. You see that in all the commercials and the advertisements also going on. I saw that recently there was a very popular credit card company that was advertising their fraud protections and how that was important to end users. So if you want to know more about that, we'll share this presentation with this link here. It's in the Global Consumer Survey here. There are also a number of other resources that we talked to already that will give you more specific details as people requested. So at this time, I'm going to just make sure we answer some of the other questions and tie this together around how these things work and really, specifically what do we mean and the tools that you're using. So I'm going to shift over to just show you a couple of things. So in this process, to summarize, right? So we talked about having a process that you could automate where you can build the apps, build in the protections, do the testing, and then finally the attack and threat monitoring. And as part of that, we'll start off with just showing you how you can create these security configurations or build in these protections in an automated way. And as part of the process that we talked about, that's something that the security team could do, or the security team and dev team could do. And then as part of this, the second part of the demo, I'll show you how you can then do this in Bitrise as an example, where you're automating the steps, adding in perhaps other steps that you need. So just to orient you, this is the Appdome environment and platform. And so anyone who sees this environment, this is the GUI. Everything that I'm showing you via the GUI can also be done through the API. But essentially, you load your apps into the Appdome platform. You can see these apps here. And then you can choose an app that you want to protect. And you can select then the security protections that you want, the fraud protections that you want, and so forth. Now, associated with my account, so let's say I'm a security person, I have an API key or token, and I am building a fusion set or a security configuration for digital banking. And so in this digital banking, security configuration, what's important to me is protecting secrets in the data. And so those secrets might be something like an API key or some other credentials. And so as part of that, I will go and encrypt the data. I may also, and that includes encrypting strings. And so you can see here, there are over 250 different options, different security protections. And as part of that, I may also add code obfuscation, whether it's binary code obfuscation or DEX relocation, to make sure that we obfuscate the logic of the app. And all this is important because you can easily just click this on and off, and you don't have to build or test this code. And once I've done that, I just hit build my app. That then builds the protections in. And so what Appdome is doing is looking at the app, looking at the frameworks that are used in the app, the libraries that are used in the app, and figuring out what is the most optimal way of matching the security protections that you've selected and applying those security selections to the app so that you end up with the protected app in the most optimal way, optimizing for size. So the app in the platform, the Appdome platform, as it's going through this, tells you what it's doing, what it's looking at, so it can optimize for your app. Now, this means for all of our customers, this means they don't have to build each and every feature in. And so for all those different features, you may have 250 different features that you might want to build in over time. If each of those takes a week or two to develop and then another week or two to test, it would take years to build out these security features. And like Marcus said, these features change all the time because hackers are always evolving. They're always figuring out new ways to break into the apps, exploit the apps. And so it's important to have the ability to rely on a partner to keep track of these things, so you and your team can focus on, the things that matter to you. And so,
Also,
go ahead, yes.
sorry, Karen, I also wanted to mention maintaining them also takes a lot of time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, and we talked about the libraries before. There are always things in open source libraries that get deprecated. And so what do you do about that? Well, this is where it's important to have a team. And so in the time that we were just talking about those issues, we've built this app, you have the security built in, and now we can see what is there. So for every app that that you've built, you get what's called a certified secure document. And in that certified secure document, you can see the elements that have been added to the app. So you can see who added the app, you can see the fusion set or the security configuration that was used, and you can see the features that were added. Now, what's also being done is, like I was saying, the Appdome platform is figuring out how to optimize the app. So as it's adding the security features in, it's also optimizing the app for size. And so as you can see here, while the app started at 156 megs, it ended up at 119, and that's because Appdome has optimized the build. And so now, once you have the security configuration, so the security team or the development team has worked with the security team to create this configuration, DevOps can take this and use it in its workflow, use it in their workflow. And so this is an example of a workflow where you have an app being cloned from the repo, building it using a Bitrise Android build step, and then Appdome's build to secure step basically takes that build and then adds to it. Now, what does that mean? So what that means is, remember the two pieces of information that you needed to have for this process, or I asked you to remember before in the Appdome part of the presentation or demo? Well, you'll use that here. So those two pieces are, first, the security configuration, which you see here, and that's the Fusion Set ID. And then you also have the secret for the Appdome API token, so that I know that I'm running this on Appdome. And now with those two pieces, you're able to run this workflow and see the results here, where you can see in the process there was I ran this before, so we didn't have to wait. The repo, the git clone repo step, then the Android build step, and then the Appdome step to secure or add the protections in an automated way. And as a result, after a few minutes, you get the artifacts. And so as a result of using the Bitrise steps, there's first the debug build that is, or APK that is built, as well as the released APK. Appdome takes that release and then adds the protections in. And this is then, this last APK here is what you would use to then sign and upload to the App Store. You could sign using Appdome or Bitrise. And then you have a bunch of other artifacts, and one of those artifacts is the certified secure document, which then allows you to see that the protections you've added have been added, and the release team can then go ahead and go ahead with that process. So I think I have that, separately here. And so what we wanted to do now is and just finalize that. So let me go back to this process. So share with you. So what we went through was building the apps, building the protections in. You can also add in different steps in the process. So here you can add in after or before the Appdome build secure step. Let's say you want to add in after, you can add in different unit tests. And so like Madre talked about, it's easy to add in different tests here. And the other best practices that we mentioned. So this step library is available for Android and iOS. And so you can leverage the best practices of a number of organizations around the world. So the very last thing that we talked about, and as a question that came up, was around threat modeling and threat monitoring. So for threat monitoring, this is where when your app is out in the wild and you want to see what is happening to the app, you can then monitor live attacks, live threats on the app. And this is by using this monitoring, this dashboard here, which will show you the source of these attacks by geography. So by country, where they're coming from, the different threats, the specific threats by app, by OS, by device. And you can then see not only what are things that are protected from, so what things are working, but you can also see maybe I did not add all the threats or protect against all the threats that I thought I had, and you can see what those new threats specifically are and drill down into what those new threats. This is a demo account, so this is just showing you some of the threats that, say, for a company that I have that has a few apps here, right? So this is not going to be for all of the apps that are being protected in the world right now, just a few that are under my management. And so you can drill down into what are the highest number of threats by device, by OS, and look at specifically what those threats are. So, are they jailbreak and root? Are they related to Android debug bridge? And so forth. And so in this case, you can see there are a number of malware attacks, and those are on jailbreak bypass tools and the use of Frida. So that means I can go back and say, this is an issue for me for the app that I want to protect. I'm going to go and make sure that we add in protection against, let's say, Frida, against fraud, and add that here. Just click on that button. So, so that is the just an overview of how you can use this full cycle here of using Bitrise and Appdome and any, in this process of automation, right? Being able to build the protections in, build the app, build the protections in, monitor those attacks, and then go back. And to Madre's point, maintain those protections, maintain that your app is continuously secured. And so these are some other resources that you can use. We'll send this presentation out. Please don't hesitate to contact us. I would like to end with our last polling question. So if we could have that, that would be great. If you would like to learn more about Appdome or Bitrise, please select one, both, or the other, or both, one or the other, or both. And we're happy to chat with you after this is over. So thank you. Oh, sorry, there was one last question for those that can maintain. Does Appdome have any verification or certifications by reputable third parties of security features of Appdome? Yes, absolutely, we do. We have a whole pen testing community that we have partnered with for years now. And we have a whole set of, or actually a library of webcasts and white papers that these pen testers have written and have joined us to talk about in terms of specific areas that they have tested and proven work in terms of Appdome protections. And they're all around certain themes, such as jailbreak or root detection. And so I'm happy to share those with you. We also have a number of webcasts with these partners coming up. And so we're happy to share, continue to share those results as we go forward. So thank you all very much for your time. And we look forward to speaking to you very soon. And we hope this session was was informational and helpful for you. And please don't hesitate to share any more questions. We'll be happy to answer them going forward. Thank you all.
Thank you, Karen, and everyone.